Hey everyone, so the story arcs from Zou through Wano are all considered to be part of one saga, the Versus 4 Emperors saga. And one thing that I, and many others, have wanted to see over the course of this saga have been character arcs for the Straw Hats. And while that hasn't necessarily happened for most of the crew, what is interesting is that there do seem to be some interesting character threads developing for many of the Straw Hats. And for some of them, these threads have been developing across the entire Versus 4 Emperors saga. And I think many readers have been overlooking a lot of these developing threads. So today I'm going to be running through the full crew and breaking those down. So to begin with, we have the curious case of Nami. I say the curious case because Oda has been interestingly giving Nami a very similar recurring moment several times throughout this saga. So we all remembered this moment where Ulti gives Nami this spiel about how Luffy will never be Pirate King, and it was silly of Nami to believe that, etc. But funnily enough, an almost identical situation happened just one arc back in Whole Cake Island, with Brule giving Nami basically the same lecture that she shouldn't believe her captain is going to be king of the pirates, because all crew members need to eventually realize that their captain is not going to be the king. So a couple times now, Nami has been pressured to basically recant her faith in Luffy, and of course, just this last chapter, we got a third instance with now Kaido himself telling her that Luffy is dead, Nami yet again refusing to believe it, and Kaido getting mad that her faith is still not broken. Now, this in itself is not a character arc. Nami's not changing over the course of any of this. It's just Nami being put in a similar position multiple times. But it is interesting to think about why Oda is choosing to hone in on Nami specifically for this recurring scenario over and over. Maybe it is leading to something, or maybe Oda just likes the idea of framing Nami as sort of Luffy's biggest cheerleader over the course of this saga. Either way, this little character thread is definitely something to think about. Now beyond that, we have Chopper. And with Chopper, what I've noticed that I discussed in my last chapter review is that Oda likes to go back specifically to Chopper after each of Luffy's defeats. After Luffy was defeated in Act 1, we basically had just a gag reaction from the rest of the Straw Hats, but Chopper was the only one that Oda had make an actual statement on the situation, with Chopper completely unfazed and certain that Luffy would be fine. Then, after Luffy was defeated on the roof the first time, while the other Straw Hats were surprised, we didn't really get any reaction from any of them besides Zoro and Sanji saying screw that. But Chopper was the one that Oda put the spotlight on, and this time Chopper's actually worried, and he's actually questioning everything. He's genuinely not sure if Luffy's okay or not, and he doesn't know what to do. And finally, after Luffy's most recent defeat, again we're getting Chopper's reaction, and he's completely shaken and just immediately accepts that Luffy has lost. Basically, over time we seem to be getting more of a contrast between how Chopper reacts to the news of Luffy's defeats versus how the other Straw Hats tend to handle it. I do wonder if this is meant to be a shortcoming of Chopper's in some way that will need to be addressed. If after all of this time, Chopper is still just a naive kid compared to the rest of the crew and doesn't yet have the fortitude to have the faith that they have. It is interesting to me that out of Luffy's 3 defeats, Chopper is the only Straw Hat that Oda has consistently gone to each time to get a reaction out of. And while Chopper started out strong, it hasn't exactly made him look good the last couple times. Next, if we look at Robin, her character thread has been pretty straightforward, but with one possibly hanging little loose end. Pre-time skip, there was of course a heavy emphasis on how valuable Robin is, and how pretty much every major organization in existence wants to capture her at all costs. This of course peaked in Enies Lobby, where there was maximum emphasis on the importance of Robin. But since the Enies Lobby arc, the focus on Robin had kind of died down, and the fact that every major organization in the world was desperate to catch her was not really prominent or even a discussed topic in the story anymore for a long time, actually hundreds of chapters. In Zou, the start of the Versus 4 Emperor saga, that was the first time in literally hundreds of chapters that it was referenced again that Robin is highly sought after as one of the most valuable and coveted assets in the entire world, and pretty much every major organization wants to capture her. This thread continues on into Onigashima with the idea that everyone wants to capture Robin finally once again being extremely prominent, with both Big Mom, Kaido, and CP0 heavily focused on her capture. Similarly, Robin's trust in her friends to protect her from the world came up again at the start of this saga, with her stating in Zou that she was secure in the knowledge that they can protect her, and Robin also bringing up the flip side in Onigashima that she wants to be able to protect them as well. So Robin's little thread in the 4 Emperors saga has been the resurgent plot point of all the major players trying to capture her, but also the fact that she knows her friends can't protect her, and she wants to protect them in turn. The one potentially hanging little loose end is that we never did get to a point where her friends had to protect her again, as the seemingly built-up showdown between CP0 and Brook never really happened, and CP0 went off on their own separate plot soon after. As such, it's up in the air whether anything will come of this idea brought up in Zou that was seemingly becoming important again in Onigashima. Next we have Usopp. I've actually discussed Usopp's running thread across the Versus 4 Emperor saga in past videos, but really it seems like the recurring fear that has kept coming up for Usopp since Zou is the fear of being tortured for answers. In Zou, we of course witnessed the iconic reveal of the minx holding out under torture and refusing to divulge information. And from that reveal, it was Usopp's reaction and shock that was given the spotlight, as he genuinely couldn't understand that level of bravery. From there on, in Wano, Usopp's biggest fear has specifically been being captured and tortured for information. It's come up multiple times at this point, with Usopp claiming that he supposedly would give up any information in a heartbeat, and wouldn't necessarily be as brave as the minx. I think it's safe to say that Usopp has yet to do anything truly brave this arc aside from his standard sniping, and in the Onigashima battle itself, Usopp has been pushing more than ever the idea of trying to save your own skin above all else. Now we know that in reality, when it comes down to it, Usopp often acts with far greater bravery than he himself believes he is capable of, and the fact is that most arcs where Usopp is being exceptionally cowardly at the beginning, those are arcs where Oda actually has Usopp set up for some outstanding moments of bravery by the end. I still hope to see some classic, iconic Usopp bravery moment by the end of Wano, and if I had to identify one running thread for him since the start of the saga, it does seem to be the idea of him supposedly valuing his own life over trying to protect others, particularly in the context of being held for torture. Then looking at Sanji, he is the only Straw Hat who definitely had a clear character storyline this saga. Not just some potential points of interest for his character like I've been mentioning for the other Straw Hats, but rather a definite, clear storyline, with of course most of the groundwork done in Whole Cake Island, and with his storyline seemingly tied up already in Wano. I discuss it at length in this video, but in short, Sanji has always been a character whose conflict is staying true to himself and his code. And over the course of Whole Cake Island and Wano, this was put to the test in the most extreme ways. In Whole Cake Island, a lot of what was tested was his chivalry, his kindness, his self-sacrificial nature, and his code as a chef. And Wano picked up on that with essentially offering Sanji a powerful ability in exchange for sacrificing his true nature and becoming an emotionless robot like his brothers. The thread in Wano in particular seemed to be, first, showing Sanji the enticing potential of giving in and using Germa's powerful raid suit, then reminding us how much Sanji values his code and sticking to his own values. Then finally giving him that ultimatum of either getting to continue using Germa's science or getting to keep his code and his sense of self, with Sanji obviously making the decision to stay true to himself, even if it meant his own death. There's not much more to say on Sanji for the moment, seems like a pretty clear conclusion. On the flip side, we have Zoro, who is the most confusing case at the moment. Zoro seems like he could have a very clear and prominent character storyline throughout this saga, like Sanji, but his thread is a bit all over the place, and I think it's still being untangled. So on the one hand, we had hints of a leadership storyline for Zoro. After all, Wano in particular is focusing on what it means to be a great leader, and is exploring that through multiple characters. Zoro's storyline in this saga began with the promise of him leading the samurai, but then within Wano itself, interestingly, Zoro chose to do the opposite and decided to shirk any leadership responsibilities, spending most of Act 2 running around on his own, though now it seems he is in fact possibly even from one of the noble ruling classes of Wano, though that too has not become relevant. So that potential leadership thread didn't go anywhere, even though Zoro did ultimately get Conqueror's Haki, it wasn't related to him stepping up into a leadership role in any way. Now on the flip side, the plot thread Zoro definitely did get in Act 2 through his interactions with Yasue, Hiyori, and Otoko, ultimately set him up with a motivation to kill Orochi. That was basically his final established goal at the end of the act. But then when we are in Onigashima, it seems like Zoro's interest has now switched to killing Kaido, and he does not mention Orochi again, so the Orochi setup seems to be irrelevant. And then Zoro ended up taking out King instead of Orochi or Kaido anyway. At the moment, it is difficult to say what most of Act 2 did for Zoro, as he did get focus, but not in a way that was relevant to what he did in Act 3. In terms of what Zoro did do in Act 3, the way it seems Zoro did develop was as a swordsman, with the King fight making Zoro take a step forward in his philosophy as a swordsman. I had talked in an earlier video about how Zoro strangely acquired Enma without any real character moment or trial associated with it, as had become the norm with Zoro's past swords. However, in the King fight, Zoro certainly got that, and clearly had his greatest challenge earning Enma over any of his swords, with Zoro essentially having to learn to go even more recklessly all out while fighting, even if it meant he could drive himself to his own death in the process. Basically, Tsunachi. The reason I say that Zoro's character thread is strangely messy is because this character moment in the King fight, learning to fight by giving your very life to the battle, is oddly unrelated to anything that was going on with his character in prior acts or in Zou. So basically, looking at the little threads that have started and stopped for Zoro, we've gotten some setup from the start about leadership that didn't come into play, some stuff about him potentially being a Shimotsuki that no longer seems relevant, and a storyline dedicated to establishing a motivation to kill Orochi that has not been brought up again. However, we do also have the focus on Zoro and death that's been consistent in all of Wano so far. As I've said, Wano is an arc about death, and with Zoro, he has been having multiple encounters with Grim Reapers in this arc so far. The concluding lesson from his fight with King was, as I said, to battle without regard for life or death, and now he does seem to be the closest to death that he's ever been. So at least that thread for Zoro seems to be still running, and if that thread is still running, it's possible that other aspects of his storyline may still come into play. And finally, I have 3 Straw Hats that I genuinely could not find a running thread for: Franky, Brook, and Jinbei. Across Zou through Wano, I don't think there is anything consistently that Oda is touching upon for their characters as far as I can tell. If you all have noticed something, please let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe.